The bank statement was shaking in my arthritic hands as I stared at the impossible numbers on that cold November morning. $250,000 gone. 25 years of careful savings, retirement funds I'd accumulated working double shifts as a hospital nurse, my late husband's life insurance money, the inheritance from my mother's estate. All vanished while I trusted the woman who was supposed to be caring for me. The numbers on the page seemed to blur together as tears filled my eyes. This wasn't just money. This was my security, my independence, my ability to stay in the home Frank and I had built together. But the security camera footage I was about to see would reveal a betrayal so calculated, so cold-blooded, so methodically evil that it would destroy everything I thought I knew about human kindness and trust. But let me tell you how it all started, because this story will make you question everyone you trust with your life and wonder how many other elderly people are being victimized right now by predators hiding behind caring smiles. My name is Dorothy Patterson, and at 82 years old, I never imagined I'd become the victim of the most sophisticated theft scheme I'd ever encountered. I live in Riverside, California, in the same modest 3-bedroom house my husband Frank and I bought 53 years ago with our wedding money and dreams of raising a family. This house has weathered earthquakes, floods, economic recessions, and the slow decline of our once vibrant neighborhood. It's where we brought home our 3 children from the hospital, where we celebrated countless birthdays and holidays, where Frank took his last breath after a brutal 8-month battle with pancreatic cancer. After Frank passed away 3 years ago, I found myself alone for the first time in my adult life, struggling with type 2 diabetes that required constant monitoring, high blood pressure that spiked dangerously when I was stressed, and early-stage rheumatoid arthritis that made simple tasks like opening jars, buttoning clothes, and climbing stairs increasingly difficult and painful. Some days, the loneliness was so overwhelming that I'd sit in Frank's favorite recliner and talk to his photograph, telling him about my day just like I had for 56 years of marriage. My daughter Sarah, who lives 2 hours away in Los Angeles with her own family and demanding career as a real estate attorney, was constantly worried about me living alone. She'd call daily, sometimes twice a day, asking if I'd eaten properly, taken my medications, remembered to lock the doors. She'd drive down every other weekend, exhausting herself with worry and guilt about not being able to provide the daily care she knew I needed. That's when Sarah found Angela Martinez through Golden Years Home Care, a reputable caregiving agency with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and glowing reviews from dozens of satisfied families. Angela was 34 years old, a certified nursing assistant with 8 years of experience, impeccable references from previous employers, and she seemed like an absolute godsend sent from heaven itself. She had kind brown eyes, a warm smile, and spoke about her own elderly grandmother with such tenderness that I felt an immediate connection. She needed the work to support her 2 young children as a single mother, and I needed someone trustworthy to help me maintain my independence while staying in my beloved home. Before I continue my story, I really want to know where you're watching me from. Tell me in the comments what city you're from, and if you can, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel because what I'm about to tell you next will absolutely destroy your faith in the people we trust most. For 8 months, Angela was everything I could have hoped for and more in a caregiver. She arrived every morning at exactly 8 a.m., rain or shine, always with a cheerful greeting and genuine interest in how I'd slept and how I was feeling. She had a system for organizing my medications that was better than anything I'd ever used, clearly labeled pill organizers for morning, afternoon, and evening doses, with detailed charts tracking my blood sugar levels, blood pressure readings, and any symptoms or side effects I experienced. Angela prepared nutritious meals that accommodated my diabetic diet while still being delicious and satisfying. She'd researched new recipes online, surprising me with creative variations of foods I loved but thought I could no longer enjoy. She taught me about portion control and carbohydrate counting in ways that made sense and didn't make me feel deprived or punished for having diabetes. Beyond the medical care, Angela provided the companionship I desperately needed after Frank's death. She'd listen patiently as I told the same stories about my grandchildren, laugh at my old jokes that everyone else had heard 100 times, and even brought her children to visit occasionally. Two adorable kids named Miguel and Sophia, who called me Abuela Dorothy, and brightened my entire week with their energy and laughter. Angela seemed to genuinely care about my emotional well-being, not just my physical health. She'd encourage me to call old friends I'd lost touch with, helped me organize photo albums that brought back wonderful memories, and even drove me to Frank's gravesite when I wanted to visit but felt too overwhelmed to go alone. She celebrated my good days when my arthritis pain was manageable and provided comfort and encouragement on the difficult days when everything hurt and I felt sorry for myself. But what I discovered would change everything I thought I knew about trust, deception, and the length some people will go to steal from the most vulnerable members of our society. Angela had been carefully studying my routines, my banking habits, my personal information, and my vulnerabilities from the very first day she walked into my home. She knew I was old-fashioned about technology, having never owned a smartphone or learned to use computers beyond the most basic functions. She knew I rarely checked my bank statements online because I preferred receiving monthly paper statements that I could hold in my hands and file in my organized system. She knew those statements often sat unopened on my kitchen counter for days or even weeks because examining financial documents reminded me painfully of Frank, who had always handled our money management. Angela knew my social security number from helping me organize my medical paperwork and insurance documents. She knew my bank account numbers from driving me to First National Bank for my weekly errands and watching me fill out deposit slips. She knew my daily schedule better than I did, when I napped, when I showered, when I talked on the phone with family members. Most importantly, she knew I trusted her completely and would never suspect that the woman who helped me with my most intimate personal care could be systematically destroying my financial security. What I didn't realize was that every act of kindness, every moment of seeming compassion, every gesture of caring concern was part of an elaborate con designed to systematically drain my life savings while keeping me completely unaware of what was happening until it was too late to stop her. The theft began small and escalated gradually over 8 months, following a pattern that Angela had clearly used before with other victims. She started by memorizing my debit card PIN when I asked her to help me at the grocery store ATM because my arthritis made it difficult and painful to punch in the numbers with enough force to register. She told me she was just making sure I entered it correctly and that she'd look away to protect my privacy. But she wasn't looking away. She was memorizing those 4 digits that would become the key to my financial destruction. Angela would position herself behind me at the ATM, pretending to organize my purse or adjust my jacket while actually watching my fingers input my PIN. She did this multiple times at different locations to make sure she had the correct numbers, always offering helpful explanations that made her behavior seem caring rather than suspicious. Within 2 weeks, Angela had somehow obtained a duplicate of my debit card. Later, I discovered she had a boyfriend named Carlos who worked at a check cashing business and had access to card duplication equipment. But at the time, I had no idea that the caring woman who helped me shower and prepared my medications was also systematically looting my bank accounts during her lunch breaks. The scheme was brilliantly executed and almost impossible to detect. Angela would make small withdrawals, $200 here, $300 there, always from ATMs near her own neighborhood, always during times when she was supposed to be running errands for me. She'd vary the amounts and locations to avoid triggering any bank fraud alerts. Sometimes she'd wait 2 or 3 weeks between withdrawals to make the theft appear random rather than systematic. But that wasn't even the worst part of her deception. While I was taking my afternoon naps, something Angela encouraged, saying I needed more rest for my health, she was using my personal information to apply for credit cards in my name. She'd intercept the mail so I never saw the applications or approval letters. She'd activate the cards using my phone number, which she could answer when I was sleeping or in the bathroom, pretending to be me with a practiced elderly voice that was disturbingly convincing. Over 8 months, Angela opened 7 credit cards in my name and ran up charges totaling $47,000. She bought electronics, expensive clothing, jewelry, and even made a down payment on a new car, all while I believed she was the trustworthy caregiver, helping me maintain my dignity and independence in my golden years. The credit card fraud was sophisticated and methodical. Angela would have the cards delivered to a P.O. box she'd rented using a fake ID with my name. She'd make purchases online and have items shipped to various addresses, friends' houses, her boyfriend's workplace, even storage units she'd rented specifically for hiding her stolen goods. She'd make minimum payments on the cards using money stolen from my checking account, creating a perfect circle of fraud that kept all the accounts in good standing and prevented any red flags that might alert me to what was happening. But what I discovered next would reveal the true depth of her betrayal and the calculating cruelty of her deception. It was a Tuesday morning in November when everything started unraveling. I had been feeling unusually tired and confused for several days, and Angela kept insisting I needed extra rest and stronger medications to help with my declining health. She'd been gradually increasing the dosage of my sleep medications, telling me my doctor had called in new prescriptions that, I later learned, were completely fabricated. Angela was drugging me to keep me compliant and confused while she accelerated her theft operation. That Tuesday morning, my neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on my door while Angela was supposedly at the pharmacy picking up my medications. Mrs. Chen was concerned because she'd seen Angela leaving my house the previous evening at 10 p.m., which seemed unusual since Angela's shift typically ended at 6 p.m. When I groggily told Mrs. Chen that Angela sometimes stayed late to help with special medical needs, my neighbor's expression grew worried. "Dorothy, dear, are you feeling all right? You seem different lately, less alert than usual." Mrs. Chen's question sparked the first flicker of suspicion I'd felt in months. As the medication-induced fog began to clear from my mind, I realized she was right. I had been feeling increasingly disoriented, sleeping much more than normal, and struggling with memory issues that my doctor had never mentioned during my recent checkups. But the real shock was yet to come. While Angela was out, I decided to call my doctor's office to ask about the new medications she'd been giving me. When Dr. Morrison's nurse told me they had no record of prescribing any new medications and suggested I bring all my current pills in for review, a cold terror began creeping up my spine. I gathered all the medication bottles Angela had been managing for me and was horrified to discover that several contained pills I didn't recognize, including powerful sedatives that weren't prescribed by any of my doctors. Angela had been buying illegal medications, possibly online or through street dealers, and systematically drugging me to keep me docile while she robbed me blind. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I could barely comprehend it. This woman I'd trusted with my most intimate care, who I'd welcomed into my home and treated like family, had been slowly poisoning me while stealing my life savings and destroying my financial future. If this story is shocking you, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next will make you question everyone you trust. That afternoon, while Angela was supposedly running errands, I forced myself to stay awake and alert despite the lingering effects of whatever drug she'd been giving me. I called my bank and asked them to read me my recent account activity over the phone. What I heard made my blood run cold. Dozens of unauthorized withdrawals, each one made during times when Angela claimed to be caring for me. ATM transactions at locations I'd never visited, in neighborhoods I'd never been to, at times when I was supposedly napping under Angela's watchful care. The pattern was undeniable. Someone with access to my debit card and PIN had been systematically draining my accounts for months. But I had no proof it was Angela. The withdrawals could have been made by anyone with my card information. I needed evidence that would hold up in court and ensure this criminal would face justice for what she'd done to me. That's when I remembered the security camera system my son-in-law had installed 6 months earlier. He'd put cameras at the front door, back door, and in the living room after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood. I rarely paid attention to the system, but suddenly I realized it might have captured evidence of Angela's crimes. With shaking hands and a determination I hadn't felt in months, I accessed the camera system's recordings on my computer. What I found was more damning than anything I could have imagined. Hours of footage showing Angela searching through my personal papers while I slept. Video of her photographing my bank statements, social security card, and medical information with her phone. Recordings of her making phone calls where she clearly impersonated me, using information stolen from my files to convince bank representatives and credit card companies that she was Dorothy Patterson. But the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. The cameras had captured Angela bringing unknown people into my home while I was unconscious from the drugs she'd been giving me. Her boyfriend Carlos, who turned out to be a convicted felon with a history of identity theft. A woman who appeared to be coaching Angela on voice impersonation techniques. Even her own children, who had apparently been taught to call her Grandma's helper if anyone ever questioned their presence in my house. The security footage revealed that my home had become the headquarters for an organized identity theft ring, with Angela as the inside operator who provided access to victims and personal information. I wasn't her first victim. She'd been systematically targeting elderly clients through the caregiving agency, using her position of trust to identify vulnerable seniors with substantial assets. But what the cameras captured next would provide the evidence needed to bring down the entire operation. On the recording from 3 days earlier, I watched in horror as Angela brought a notary public into my home while I was drugged and barely conscious. The notary, who was clearly part of the scheme, helped Angela forge my signature on documents that would have transferred ownership of my house to a shell company controlled by Carlos. If I hadn't discovered the theft when I did, I would have lost not just my savings, but my home of 53 years. The legal documents they'd forged were sophisticated and nearly foolproof. Power of attorney papers that would have given Angela complete control over my finances. A fraudulent will that left everything to a fake charity run by her criminal associates. Even a fabricated medical evaluation claiming I was mentally incompetent and needed a legal guardian, a role Angela was positioned to fill. The scope of the planned theft was breathtaking. They weren't just stealing my money, they were systematically taking over my entire life, positioning themselves to control my assets, my property, and even my medical decisions. If their plan had succeeded, I would have become a prisoner in my own home, completely dependent on the very people who were robbing me. But I wasn't going to let that happen, not without a fight. The next morning, I pretended to be my usual drowsy, confused self when Angela arrived for work. I let her give me the morning medications, but secretly spit them out when she wasn't looking. I acted grateful when she offered to help organize my financial papers and pretended to nap while she continued her criminal activities, all of which were being recorded by the security cameras. By lunchtime, I had enough evidence to bury her. While Angela was out supposedly running errands, but actually making another illegal withdrawal from my account, as I later confirmed, I called the police, my bank, and my daughter Sarah. Within 2 hours, my house was swarming with detectives, bank fraud investigators, and representatives from the district attorney's office. Detective Rodriguez, who specialized in elder abuse cases, told me this was one of the most sophisticated caregiving fraud schemes he'd ever encountered. The security camera footage provided irrefutable evidence of multiple felonies, including identity theft, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But the story was far from over. Angela's arrest would expose a criminal network that had been operating for years. When Angela returned from her errands, she walked straight into a carefully orchestrated trap. Detective Rodriguez was waiting in my living room, along with 2 other officers and a representative from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Her face went completely white when she realized her criminal empire was collapsing around her. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The security camera footage, the forged documents, the duplicated debit cards found in her purse, the illegal medications she'd been using to drug me, everything pointed to a level of criminal sophistication that went far beyond simple theft. Under interrogation, Angela initially tried to claim she was innocent, that someone else must have been using my cards and personal information. But when confronted with hours of video evidence showing her criminal activities, her story began falling apart. The truth that emerged was even more disturbing than I'd imagined. Angela Martinez wasn't even her real name. She was actually Maria Santos, a career criminal with convictions for identity theft and elder abuse in 3 different states. She'd been using fake credentials and forged references to get caregiving jobs with elderly clients, systematically robbing them while maintaining the perfect cover of a trusted healthcare provider. The Golden Years Home Care Agency had been completely fooled by her fake identity and fabricated work history. Their background check had cleared Angela Martinez because that person existed only on paper, a carefully constructed false identity that Maria had been using for 4 years. But what investigators discovered about her criminal network was truly shocking. Maria was part of an organized crime syndicate that specifically targeted elderly people through caregiving services, home healthcare agencies, and senior living facilities. The ring included corrupt notaries, identity theft specialists, money laundering experts, and even a few dishonest employees at banks and credit card companies who helped facilitate the frauds. Over 5 years, this criminal network had stolen an estimated $3.2 million from elderly victims across California, Nevada, and Arizona. Most of their victims never realized they'd been robbed because the criminals were careful to target people with early-stage dementia, social isolation, or health problems that made them less likely to monitor their finances carefully. I was supposed to be their perfect victim, a widow living alone with substantial assets and no close family oversight. But their plan was thwarted by an alert neighbor, a security camera system, and one grandmother who refused to go down without a fight. The legal proceedings that followed would expose the full scope of this criminal enterprise and ensure that justice was served. Maria Santos was charged with 23 felonies, including elder abuse, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and illegal distribution of controlled substances. Her boyfriend Carlos faced similar charges, along with additional counts for operating the card duplication equipment and money laundering. The fraudulent notary who had helped forge my legal documents was arrested and lost her professional license. The corrupt bank employee who had helped access my accounts was fired and criminally charged. Even the pharmacy technician who had been selling Maria the illegal sedatives she used to drug me was prosecuted. But the victory that meant the most to me was getting my money back. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence against Maria and her criminal network, my bank was able to reverse all the unauthorized transactions and restore the $250,000 that had been stolen from my accounts. The credit card companies canceled the fraudulent cards and removed all charges from my credit report. My insurance company even covered the cost of upgrading my home security system and hiring a legitimate, thoroughly vetted caregiver. 6 months later, Maria Santos was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Carlos received 12 years. The other members of their criminal network received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years, depending on their level of involvement. But the most satisfying moment came during Maria's sentencing hearing when I was allowed to address the court and my former caregiver directly. "You didn't just steal my money," I told her, my voice strong and clear. "You stole my sense of safety, my ability to trust, and nearly stole my independence. You preyed on my vulnerability and kindness, and you would have left me with nothing if I hadn't fought back. But I want you to know that you failed. I'm still here. I'm still strong, and I'm going to make sure other elderly people don't fall victim to predators like you." Today, 1 year after Maria's arrest, I'm healthier and more alert than I've been in years. The illegal medications she'd been giving me had been slowly deteriorating my cognitive function and physical health. With those toxins out of my system and proper medical care, I've regained my energy, my mental clarity, and my zest for life. I now work with local law enforcement and the district attorney's office to educate other seniors about caregiving fraud and elder abuse. I've spoken at community centers, senior living facilities, and even testified before the state legislature about the need for stronger background checks and oversight in the home healthcare industry. My story has helped identify and prosecute 3 other caregiving fraud schemes in our county alone. 12 more elderly victims have come forward to report similar experiences, and law enforcement has recovered over $800,000 in stolen assets. Share this story if it moved you, because every senior citizen deserves to age with dignity and security, free from the predators who target our most vulnerable neighbors. The security camera system that captured Maria's crimes has become a powerful tool for protecting my independence. I've learned to use technology that I once feared, and I now monitor my accounts online daily. I've also connected with other seniors in my neighborhood to create an informal support network where we look out for each other and share information about potential scams and frauds. My new caregiver, Patricia, comes from a reputable agency with rigorous background checks and ongoing supervision. More importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts and maintain oversight of my own care, even when I need help with daily activities. The experience taught me that being vulnerable doesn't mean being helpless. Even at 82 years old, I had the power to fight back against someone who tried to victimize me. I had the strength to seek justice and the determination to help protect others from similar crimes. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But sometimes, when we refuse to be victims and stand up for ourselves, we discover reserves of strength we never knew we had. Maria Santos thought she had found the perfect mark in a lonely, confused elderly woman. Instead, she met a grandmother who was tougher than she looked and determined to ensure that justice was served. That's the power of refusing to be defeated by the worst in human nature and choosing instead to fight for what's right.